I moved to Lansing Hollow 3 years ago. Population 3,212. It's the kind of place with one gas station, 2 churches, and a high school football team the whole town shows up for on Fridays. I bought a small ranch-style house at the end of Willow Lane. It wasn't fancy, but it had a porch, a decent backyard, and neighbors that smiled when they saw you. I was just starting over. Divorce. New job. Needed quiet. Lansing gave me that. Until he moved in next door. His name was Frank Culler. At least, that's what he told me when he showed up at my door with a 6-pack and a forced grin. Figured I'd say hello like the old days, he said. He looked to be in his mid-50s. Tall, wiry. The kind of guy who wore the same work jacket no matter the weather. He had those pale blue eyes that never seemed to blink enough, like he was always just watching. I thanked him for the beer, made small talk. He told me he'd worked off and on in construction, mostly on the East Coast. Said he was tired of the city. Wanted space. Peace and quiet. Didn't we all? The first week, nothing felt off. He kept to himself. I saw him in his backyard a few times, trimming hedges that didn't need trimming. Once I noticed he had no furniture in his front room, just a bare bulb and folding chair. One night, I caught him standing perfectly still in his backyard. No cigarette. No phone. Just staring up at the stars. I waved. He didn't wave back. Then came the first noise. It was around 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was half asleep when I heard a scraping sound. Long, metallic, like someone dragging a shovel across concrete. I got up, looked out the window. Frank was in his driveway. Shirtless. Wearing boots. He was pushing a heavy metal bin toward the side of his house. No lights on. Just him and that horrible screeching sound. I watched him drag it out of sight behind a shed. The next morning, the bin was gone. Not by the trash. Not beside the garage. Just gone. I chalked it up to odd hours. Maybe he worked nights. Maybe I was overthinking it. But then things got worse. I started hearing muttering through the walls. Frank's house sat maybe 20 feet from mine, and when my windows were open, I'd catch fragments of his voice at night. Not loud, just low, rhythmic, like he was repeating something over and over. Once I thought I heard my own name. Another night, I caught him watching me from behind his curtain. Just standing there. Unmoving. I closed my blinds. Next day, I found footprints in the dirt under my window. Boots. Same tread I'd seen him wear. I mentioned it to the sheriff's deputy, Tommy Bricks, a younger guy who I'd coached Little League with years back in another life. He didn't seem concerned. Frank's a little weird, sure, he said. But harmless. Keeps to himself. Doesn't cause trouble. I asked if he had a record. Tommy shrugged. Ran him when he moved in. Nothing popped. Clean. That Friday, Frank invited me over. I didn't want to go, but in a town this size, declining once meant you were seen as rude forever. His house was darker than mine. Shades always drawn. Air smelled like dust and rusted metal. He offered me a beer. I didn't drink it. We sat in his bare living room, same folding chair, a small TV playing static in the corner. I noticed there were dozens of old Polaroids pinned to the wall. Not of family. Not of places. Just faces. Strangers. Some looking directly at the camera, others mid-turn. All of them looked surprised. I asked about them. Frank smiled. Just people I've met, he said. Good to keep track. I left early, faking a phone call. That night, I couldn't sleep. I checked every lock twice. At 3:07 a.m., my motion light clicked on. I looked out. Frank was in my yard. Not doing anything. Just standing there. Staring at my house. He didn't move for a full 7 minutes. Then he walked back to his own porch. Sat on his steps. And stayed there until dawn. I called Tommy again. He promised to swing by and have a word. But I never saw a squad car. And the next time I looked at Frank's wall, there was a new Polaroid. A face I recognized. Mine. I didn't sleep after I saw the Polaroid. It was there, tacked crookedly in the middle of Frank's wall. Me, standing on my front porch, holding a cup of coffee, my face slack, like I wasn't aware the photo was being taken. Because I wasn't. I remember the morning 3 days ago. I come out to check the mailbox, still in pajamas. I never saw anyone, never heard a click. But there it was. I left his house in a haze. Didn't say goodbye. Didn't even pretend to be polite. I walked straight home, locked the door, and drew every curtain I had. I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew what I saw. And I knew, deep down, that Frank had been inside my yard more than once. Maybe even closer. The next morning, I installed 2 security cameras. One on the porch, one by the backyard gate. Cost me $200 and most of my patience, but I felt better once they were up. That night, I checked the feed obsessively. At 2:41 a.m., motion alert pinged. Backyard camera. Movement at the gate. I opened the footage, and there he was, Frank, standing on the other side of my fence, just outside the reach of the sensor light, holding something long in his right hand, too dark to make out. He didn't move for almost 2 full minutes. Then he turned, faced the camera, and smiled. Not a big grin, just a small, tight curl of his lips. Then he backed away into the darkness, like he'd wanted me to see it, like it was a warning. I saved the footage, sent it to Deputy Bricks. No reply, not for a day. Then a voicemail. "Hey man." I showed it to the sheriff. He said unless Frank's actually on your property, there's not much we can do. Kinda gray area, legally. If he makes contact or trespasses, that's different. Call me if anything escalates. Escalates. What the hell did he think this was already? I didn't call back. Instead, I started keeping my blinds closed 24/7. I moved a baseball bat next to the bed. Began locking my bedroom door at night, which I hadn't done since college. I noticed little things. Too many little things. My trash cans were moved 6 inches from where I left them. The lid to my gas tank was unscrewed. A faint scratch appeared across my front door one morning, shallow, curved, like someone dragged a key or a nail. Every day I grew more certain Frank was testing my boundaries, seeing what he could get away with. Then came the scratching. First, I thought it was just mice. Old house. Happens. But it was too rhythmic, too deliberate. A slow, dragging sound, like fingernails along wood. Always at night. Always from inside the walls. I crawled into the crawl space under my house with a flashlight and looked for signs of pests. Droppings. Holes. Nothing. And then I found it. In the far corner, near the foundation, Polaroid nailed to a joist. A photo of my living room, taken from outside the window, curtain half open. Another one pinned beneath it, me asleep on the couch. My heart froze. I scrambled out of the crawl space, panting. He'd been inside my yard. He'd been close enough to take pictures while I slept. I went straight to the sheriff's office. Not a phone call, not an email. I wanted someone to look me in the eye when they said, "There's nothing we can do." The woman at the desk was polite but distracted. Sheriff wasn't in. Deputy Bricks was on patrol. She took my name, said she'd file the concern. I left the Polaroids on the counter, told her to look at them. That night I stayed up. No lights. Just sat in the dark with the porch camera feed open on my phone. Bat in hand, heart racing every time the wind moved a tree. Then around 3 a.m., the feed glitched, just for a second. Static. When it returned, my camera angle was different, tilted slightly upward, like someone had touched it. I ran to the window, nobody there. But when I checked the footage from earlier, I nearly dropped the phone. At 2:56 a.m., the camera shook. Then a hand came into view, gloved, adjusting the lens, then pulling away. Whoever it was, they knew the camera was there, and they weren't afraid. The next morning, I found another envelope in the mailbox. No stamp, no address, just my name handwritten. Inside was a single photograph. Not a Polaroid this time. Printed photo. Glossy. Clean. Me. In the bathroom mirror. Taken through the crack in the door. From inside the house. After I found that photo, I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch with the bat across my lap, every light on in the house. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my coffee twice before sunrise. Someone had been inside my house, and I hadn't heard a thing. No broken window, no tripped locks, no creaking floorboards. Just a photograph of me brushing my teeth, cracked bathroom door, just enough to catch my reflection. That image stuck in my mind like a splinter, because it meant he was there just a few feet away while I stood unaware. At 7:02 a.m. I drove straight to the sheriff's office. Deputy Bricks met me outside. He looked tired, or maybe just embarrassed. I handed him the photo. He stared at it for a long time. "You're saying this was taken from inside your place?" "Yes," I said. "And I didn't leave the door open. I don't have a broken lock. This isn't paranoia, Tommy. Frank's coming inside." He swallowed hard. "All right. That changes things." They sent 2 officers to walk through my house with me. Guns on their hips, radios crackling. One checked the locks and windows. The other looked for forced entry. They found nothing. I asked them to check the crawl space again. We opened the panel and ducked down with flashlights. Same dusty concrete. Same insulation panels. But in the far back corner, there was something new. A pile of food wrappers. Granola bars. Protein packs. Water bottles. And next to it, a blanket. Folded. Not old. Not dirty. Like someone had just left in a hurry. There were scratches on the wood beams. Dozens of them. Tallies like days counted. Some circled. One date written in black marker. 2/14, window open. He never noticed. I felt sick. He hadn't just been sneaking in. He'd been staying. They brought in a forensics team. Dusted for prints. Took samples. The crawl space was now an active scene. Tommy stayed behind, pacing in my yard with his phone to his ear, speaking low. When he came back, he said, "We're issuing a temporary restraining order. Sheriff wants you to stay with someone else tonight, just in case." I told him no. This was my house. I wasn't leaving it. He didn't push, but he gave me his personal number. That night, I didn't turn the lights on. I sat in the dark with a knife in my hand, staring at the crawlspace panel. No movement. No sound. Then, around 3:20 a.m., I heard a noise. Not scratching. Not footsteps. Whispering. Coming from the air vent above the TV. I moved slowly. Turned off the fan. Held my breath. The voice kept going, soft, low, like someone speaking to themselves. I couldn't make out words. Just the rhythm. Like chanting. Then silence. I moved toward the hallway, and my phone vibrated. A text. Unknown number. "You're being so good tonight. Very still. That's how I like you." I dropped the knife. Then the panel in the hallway creaked. Just a little. Like weight shifting behind it. I called Tommy. Barely got the words out. He said they were on their way. 10 minutes. The longest 10 minutes of my life. I locked myself in the bathroom. Pressed my back to the door. Knife in hand. Then I heard the floor creak outside the door. Once. Twice. Then a knock. Not loud, just gentle, like someone testing it. Then silence. When the cops arrived, they didn't find Frank, but they found another camera, tucked behind a heating vent in the living room. Wireless. Small. Recording to an SD card. We pulled the footage. Hours of me eating, walking, watching TV, sleeping. There were 7 different times he came into the house. He never took anything. He never moved anything obvious. He just stood, watched, recorded. Once he stood over me while I was asleep on the couch. For 6 straight minutes. Just watching. The sheriff signed a full search warrant the next morning. They raided Frank's house. I watched from the street behind a wall of officers. They went in hard. And what they found? They didn't tell me everything. But I heard pieces. A crawl tunnel connecting to my foundation. A wall covered in photos, dozens, maybe hundreds. Maps of the neighborhood. Schedules. Notes. And a journal. Tommy wouldn't let me read it. Said it was being processed. But he couldn't hide the look on his face. Like he'd read something he wished he hadn't. They brought Frank out in cuffs. He didn't fight. Didn't resist. He just looked at me and smiled. Like it was a game we'd both played. And he was proud I'd figured it out. Then he said one sentence. Loud enough for me to hear. There's always more than one way in. They took Frank away 5 days ago. It should have ended there. I should feel safe. But I don't. Not even close. The town's still buzzing about it. The creep on Willow Lane. The police have kept most of the details quiet, but word spreads fast in a place this small. I've heard whispers at the gas station, at the diner. People say they found maps of other houses. That Frank was watching more than just me. I tried going back to work, pretending things were normal. But I last about 2 hours before the walls feel too tight and I need to leave. I haven't slept a full night since they cuffed him. Because I keep thinking about what he said. There's always more than one way in. I had the crawl space sealed. New concrete poured, vents reinforced. I paid a contractor from 2 towns over to do it. Told him I didn't care about price, just that it had to be permanent. He looked at me like I was nuts, but he didn't ask questions. He finished in 2 days. Said, nothing's getting through this. I nodded, but I didn't believe him. The house is quiet now. Too quiet. Every creak sounds loaded. Every tick of the water heater sets my teeth on edge. I unplugged my TV. Covered the vents. Boarded up the attic access. Installed 2 more cameras, one in the hallway, one facing the back door. I should feel better. But now? Now I'm hearing knocking. Not on the doors. Not on the windows. From inside the walls. The first night I heard it, I was lying in bed. The knocking was soft. Slow. 3 taps. Then silence. I sat up and waited. 10 minutes later, 3 more taps. From a different wall. I checked the cameras. Nothing. I walked the whole house with a flashlight. Nothing. Next day, I asked Tommy if Frank was still in custody. He looked annoyed. Yeah. Why wouldn't he be? I told him I was hearing things again. He lowered his voice. Evan, man, we found everything. The crawl tunnel, the camera rig, even the audio logs. He was acting alone. There's no one else. Then how did he get the photo from inside my house? Tommy hesitated. Just for a second. Then, he's a damn good stalker. That's how. But his eyes said something else. That night, I found a note in my kitchen. I hadn't heard anyone come in. I didn't leave the door unlocked. But it was there on the counter. One torn piece of paper. You shouldn't have sealed the door. I called the police. Again. They came. Checked every inch of the house. Again. No prints. No signs of forced entry. Not a single camera had captured movement. They didn't say it out loud, but I saw it in their faces. They think I'm breaking. Maybe I am. I set up a sound recorder in my bedroom. I let it run overnight. 7 hours. I played it back the next morning. For the first 6 hours, it's nothing but silence. Then at 3:12 a.m., I hear it. Breathing. Not mine. I was asleep. No movement. Just a soft, deliberate inhale. Then a whisper. Low. Right into the mic. Still here? I called Tommy again. He didn't answer. I drove to the station. They said he was out on a welfare check over on Miller Road. Said I could wait, but it might be a while. I didn't wait. When I got home, there was a smell in the air. Not strong. Just faint. Old cologne. Cheap. The kind Frank used to wear. It was strongest near the hallway closet. I opened it. Nothing inside. But taped to the wall behind a loose plank was another photo. This one of my front door, taken from inside the house, aimed out through the peephole, and scrawled across the bottom in red ink. Which side are you on now? I've stopped turning off the lights. I don't sleep. I just doze sitting up with the bat in hand. I know it sounds crazy. I know what they'd say. Paranoia. Trauma. Hallucinations. But I'm not imagining the photos. Or the notes. Or the whispering. And deep down, I know what Frank meant. There's always more than one way in. This wasn't just about doors and windows. It wasn't just about crawl spaces or keys. It was about access. To the house. To my life. To me. He studied me. For months. Maybe longer. He knew how I thought. How I moved. When I was weak. When I was too tired to notice. And now, even with him gone, I still feel him. Like he left something behind. A part of himself. In the wiring. In the vents. In the mirror. Last night I heard my name. Clear. Deliberate. Right outside my bedroom door. I was awake, not dreaming. Not in that half-sleep fog. I was sitting up, bat in hand, watching the hallway through a crack in the door. And someone whispered, Evan. Not loud. Not urgent. Just patient. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then it came again. This time from behind the wall. Still watching. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I just sat there, sweating through my shirt, eyes on the drywall, listening. Because now I know. Frank wasn't working alone. It started coming back to me. Things I'd missed. Details I ignored. Like the power flickers, short little outages, never longer than a second. Always at night. Always followed by that faint hum. Like a phone vibrating on a table. And the new mail carrier who started 3 months ago never spoke, never smiled, just stared a little too long when I signed for a package. Or the fact that I hadn't seen Mrs. Langford, the old woman 2 houses down, in weeks, and no one else seemed to notice. Frank was just a crack, a fracture, a test, and I passed it, or failed it. I don't know which anymore. I called the sheriff's office again. Tommy finally picked up. He sounded different, distant. I told him the sounds were back. The photos, the notes. He said, "We cleared the house, Evan. Frank's locked up. But it's still happening. You need to sleep." There was something in his voice. Like he wasn't surprised. Like he'd had this conversation before. This morning, I checked the crawl space again, even though it had been sealed. I pulled up the new concrete slab with a hammer and a chisel. Sweat pouring down my face, muscles aching, and underneath, dirt, dry, undisturbed, except a small plastic bag. Inside, a USB stick, a folded page torn from a notebook, another photo. The photo was of me, but not in my house. It was taken from above, like from a ceiling camera. I was sitting in my living room, drinking coffee, same position I sat in every morning. Only I don't have a ceiling camera. I never installed one. The note read, "The others are quieter, but they're learning. We watched Frank. He cracked too early. You took longer. You're better. That's why we picked you. Welcome to the other side. I plugged the USB stick into my laptop. It auto-ran a video. Grainy footage. Night vision style. It was me sleeping in bed. The camera zoomed slightly. In the corner of the room, almost invisible in the darkness, was a shape. Not moving. Not making noise. Just standing there watching me. The timestamp said it was 4 nights ago. I drove straight to the sheriff's department. Demanded to see Tommy. He met me in the parking lot. I showed him the photo, the note, the USB. He didn't even touch them. Didn't ask questions. He just said, "We told you to seal the house, not dig it back open." And then he walked away. I started noticing them that week. In the grocery store, at the gas station, people I recognized, but didn't. The cashier who rang up my stuff 3 times in the same week, but never blinked. The man at the hardware store who always wore gloves. The girl down the street who watched my house for 3 hours from the bus stop. They're part of it. They're already in. Frank was the only one sloppy enough to get caught. The others, they're still playing the game, still watching, and I gave them what they wanted. Access. I boarded up the vents, ripped the power panel off the wall, threw every piece of tech I had into the fire pit out back. But they still know, because now I see the cracks. In the mirror, just for a second, I see the reflection move wrong. In the silence, I hear breathing that isn't mine. And sometimes, when I close my eyes too long, I wake up in the same place, but the light's a little too dim. The furniture's just slightly off. And the clock on the wall ticks backward. There's always more than one way in. It's not just a phrase anymore. It's a warning. Because the others, they never broke into my house. They rewrote it. And now I live inside their version. Frank, he wasn't the threat. He was the recruiter, and I let him in. If this is the last thing I write, let it be this. Don't ignore the little things. The camera glitch, the vent noise, the picture that shifts an inch to the left. You think you're alone in your house? You're not. You never were.